Well, welcome to Christ and Culture. This is Pastor Jeff Short. Welcome to the conversation today. Today we're going to be talking about something that has recently popped up in the news, and that is this Southern Baptist Convention sexual abuse report that has been commissioned by the Executive Committee of the Southern Baptist Convention to understand, to grapple with, to discover how far and to what extent is there sexual abuse happening in Southern Baptist churches among Southern Baptist people. So this was commissioned by the Executive Committee last year, and now the report has been done, and it's something like 300 pages, we've learned. And while I am trying to get a hold of a copy of the 300-page report, I haven't found it yet, but I will be reading it as soon as I can download a copy, and I want to digest it. But we're already hearing certain things coming from the report, and unfortunately, we're getting these reports of the report from the secular media, the secular, humanistic, mainstream media, and they love to do anything, say anything negative about Christianity, the church, Christians. So they're more than eager to take any tidbits from this report and try to smear all of Christianity, especially the Southern Baptist churches, because Southern Baptist churches tend to be more historically faithful Christians, Bible-believing Christians who actually take the faith seriously, as opposed to, say, the liberal progressive churches that are watered down to the point where basically they're secular humanistic communities with religious languages, like your mainline denominational churches like United Methodist, the mainline body, and then the PCUSA, Presbyterian Church in the USA, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in the USA, and so forth. These are mainline Protestant denominations that have watered down the faith so much that they are basically secular humanistic communities with religious symbols. But the real Bible-believing Christians, a lot of them are found in the Southern Baptist Convention churches. And so the mainstream media reporters would love to just create a scandal, much like the Roman Catholic Church experienced in around 2000, and then most recently in 2017, I think it was, 2018, where the sexual abuse scandals resurfaced and so forth. And so they want to the mainstream media want to craft a narrative that says, hey, the Southern Baptist Convention are just like the Roman Catholic Church with their secretive cover-up of sexual abuse and everything like that. They want to make it a sexual abuse scandal 2.0. And this time, it's the Protestants' role to be the perpetrators. And last time, it was the Roman Catholics. Now it's the Protestants' churches that are supposed to get creamed with this sexual abuse scandal. And they're going to make it into a scandal as best they can. Now, this 300-page report, we want to go into this report, but we want to ask questions about this report, and we want to get perspective, and we want to get proportion, and we want to find out, really, the question is there a widespread problem? Is there a crisis? Should there be considered a crisis in the Southern Baptist Convention over sexual abuse? And what level would a crisis have to reach? So, in other words, we live in a sinful world. We are all sinners. That's what the Bible says, Romans 1. And it talks about sinners, and then it talks about in Romans, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And so all people have sin and the sin nature, and they struggle against the sin nature. There are certain percentage of society of people who are particularly depraved and sinful in the area of sexual sins. And you could name a number of different sexual sins that certain people have a propensity toward. And so when you have free and open public churches and you have open to the public and welcome to the public, and they wander in the church, you're going to have people who are associated with Southern Baptist churches who are involved in all kinds of moral depravity. Now, you're also going to have a certain number, a percentage of pastors who are involved in that also. Unfortunately, that's the way it's going to be in a sinful world. And these pastors should be kicked out. They should be removed. They should be dealt with harshly, because it says, let not many of you be teachers. That's what the New Testament teaches us. Let not many of you be teachers, because you will incur a stricter judgment. You have to live up to a higher level. So among our clergy and pastors and denominational leaders and evangelists and all of the people who are influencers in the churches, there is a high standard, and they should live up to those high standards, or they need to leave. And if they don't leave willingly, they need to be kicked out and excommunicated, as they call it formally. So we need to bear in mind that there will be, without even having read the report, I totally believe, it makes total rational sense, that there are going to be predators that are in and around every single church that you can think of. As good as they are, as good, the best churches in the Southern Baptist Convention are going to have sexual predators prowling around, either outside, coming in, out, involved in different levels of the church. Sunday school worker, nursery worker, Sunday school teachers. There's going to be a certain percentage of sinful people who are sinful in the area of sexual abuse. And these people need to be weeded out of there and kicked out and gotten away from the rest of the people. But if you're a public institution and you welcome the public, you cannot have something like asking people when they come in the door, are you a sexual predator? Okay, you can. No, you're not. Okay, you can come in. No, it's impossible to do that. So there's always going to be a certain noise floor, in other words, a noise level where these people are at. The point of the report is to show to what extent this involves the leaders in churches at some level. Now, the first question that I have about this report is who conducted the report, and it's called a company called Guidepost. And Guidepost, the only Guidepost that I'm familiar with is the magazine Guidepost, but it's not, I don't believe it's connected with the magazine Guidepost that was started by, I believe, Norman Vincent Peale back 60, 70 years ago, and was run by his wife, and has always been sort of a staple in households. I don't believe it's connected in any way with that, but it's called Guidepost. Now, I would want to know who are the people who conducted the study, and what are their views about things like the Me Too movement, and what do they believe about the Me Too movement, and what do they believe about the statement, believe all women? And how do they respond to certain questions? Because that's very, very important. Because if they're going to, for example, if they hold to the mantra, believe all women, well, then that is going to color the way they conduct a study. If they are very, very, very believing of almost all the women who give testimonies in the Me Too movement, that's also going to color the study. So I guess we really need to find out who Guidepost is and who are the people behind it, and what are their names and what are their beliefs and who are they affiliated with and what are their convictions about the Me Too movement, about believe all women, about like the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, and what is their general approach to investigating these kinds of questions, because if they are part of the radical left, if they're part of the progressive Bernie Sanders Democrats, I would question the report, because they're coming at it from an angle that cannot be substantiated and is illogical. Believing all women is an illogical statement. Of course, we don't believe all women. We listen to all women, but women are sinners too, and they lie and they create falsehoods and build false narratives for their own purposes, just like men. And so we don't believe all women. We listen to all women. We check out what they're saying, and if it lines up with the evidence, then we believe them. If it doesn't, we discount them. We discredit them, the ones that are telling it. So I would want to know where this group of researchers, the ones that conducted the study, Guidepost, who are they? What is it? Who are they? Who are the specifically names of the people, and who are they? And something about them. Second, I would want to look through, and I will look through this report and see if who they have come up with. Supposedly the information that I'm reading now about the report is that they've come up with 700 names of people affiliated in some capacity in Southern Baptist Convention leadership, whether at a local church level, at the denominational level, within the church, a worker within the church, a staff member in the church, someone affiliated with in some way with leadership in the church. They've come up with 700 names of people who were accused of some form of sexual abuse in the last 20 years. So if you look at 20 years and you divide that by 700, we're talking a little less than 30 a year. And I would want to know, okay, what kinds of accusations are these? And who are these people? So you actually have to dig down deep into them and go through the list. And you have to say, okay, accusation number one, who is this person? What was their connection with the Southern Baptist Convention? What are they accused of? And what are the circumstances of this accusation? We don't believe right off the bat 700 accusations, because that would then make us part of the Me Too movement, believe all women kind of mantra. And again, that is illogical, irrational, and really does a disservice to everyone when that kind of a standard is put forth in investigating. That is a nonsensical way to conduct a study. And I hope that the people who did the study did not do that. But they're throwing it out, this number, 700 accusations of people affiliated with the Southern Baptist Convention in some kind of capacity of leadership. And that equals out to a little less than 30 a year. So who are these 30 people a year that are being accused of sexual abuse? And again, what are the specific circumstances, and what are the accusations, and what are the circumstances of the accusations? And are the people accusing these 30 people a year credible? So you got to dig down deep, because the media, the mainstream media, they're not going to want to dig down deep. What they're going to want to do is lift out some really the most sensational examples. They're gonna look through those 700, and they're gonna come up with the most egregious examples of sexual abuse that everyone agrees that this person, whoever it is, this perpetrator, does not belong in any kind of leadership in any church, whether Southern Baptist or Roman Catholic or Protestant of any type. they're going to go to the most salacious and most egregious offenses, and then they're going to try to paint the whole list as that. It's like that's happening every day in every Southern Baptist church, and this is just an example, a tip of the iceberg of what's really going on in the church, and they're going to try to paint Southern Baptists as hypocrites, two-faced, and liars, dishonest, deceivers. They're going to try to use this to try to smear Christianity in all forms. And they're going to try to bring it together, couple it with the Roman Catholic Church sexual abuse scandal. And they're going to try to link them together and say, see, the biggest Catholic body, the biggest denomination, Roman Catholicism, and then the biggest Protestant denomination, they're all of the same thing. They're the two sides of the same coin. They're all abusers and hypocrites and liars and cheaters. Don't trust them. The leaders are immoral, and they're preaching against sexual immorality, but they're involved in it, and all this. They're going to try to make it as bad as it can get. And we have to, when we look at this report, and I am going to read through the report, and I'm going to report back on the report. So I'm going to go through there in detail and try to get a perspective on it. That's what we need. We need to get a perspective on this and say what is being said in this report and what is not being said in this report. And who are these people that are being accused of sexual abuse? And who are their accusers? And right off the bat, I would assume that some of these accusations are absolutely true. And I would also assume that some of these accusations are false, that are not true. And there are reasons behind why an accuser would accuse someone of this, but you simply can't have 700 people presented to the world and say, these people are sexual abusers. They're accused of sexual abuse. They owe their day in court. Now, no doubt some of these people are just the scum of the earth, the really bad kinds of people, predators, and need to be in jail. But then others are more of a he said, she said, how much of it's true, how much of it's false. And then some of these are flat out false accusations, which we've seen before in situations like this. For example, like the lacrosse team, the college lacrosse team that was accused of raping a girl. And as it turns out, that was completely false. And these young men's lives are ruined for a long time because of that false accusation. And we've heard other high-profile cases where the accuser simply flat out lied. For whatever reason, she flat out lied. So as Southern Baptist people, we need to actually, and I consider myself Southern Baptist. I've been ordained in the Southern Baptist Convention. I pastored Southern Baptist churches. I'm not presently pastoring a Southern Baptist church, but I've been around the churches. I've never been aware of any kind of sexual abuse happening at the Southern Baptist church that I pastored. I have heard from people in the congregation of situations of abuse involving family members in their family. But because all pastors have to hear that, all pastors have counseling situations where they learn of and are told about abuse situations in their family or in their relatives or extended family and so on and so forth, and you have to deal with that stuff. But I've never, ever seen a situation where an actual leader was involved in any of this at any level. Now, I'm sure that there might have been some situation. You have to remember at even the local church level, and even a small church, there are all kinds of situations where people interact with other people. And Sunday school classes, youth groups, music groups. There are so many human interactions involved in a church, even a small church. And then when you get these big mega churches, then you have all kinds of situations where hundreds and even thousands of people are interacting with each other in different situations. And there are different levels of leadership. There are volunteer leaders, and then there are, and almost all people who are involved in a church in any ministry are volunteers. And only a few people on staff are actually getting paid. So you have all these Sunday school teachers and nursery workers and people who work in different ministries and youth group people and adults that chaperone youth events. And it's just endless amount of human interactions in a church. And you just pray and you try to do your best that there isn't anything sinful or evil happening in those multiple interactions that occur at a church. But because of the sinfulness of our world, because of the sinful human nature in the heart and the devil and the temptations that are there, you got to believe that there are things happening that are sick and sad and discouraging and dangerous. And there's no question that we're beginning to find out that we really have to work super hard, especially in today's society, to deal with and combat the evil that is out there because of the sex revolution of the 60s. You know, the 60s was a watershed in the sexual moral revolution because it was a time when people cast off and overthrew and rejected the moral standards of the Bible. So before the 60s, it was pretty much understood that that single people waited until they were married. Good single people, good girls, good boys, teenagers, young people waited until they were married to have sex. Yes, there were people doing that immorally, but it was frowned upon because of social peer pressure. The reputations would be ruined, and there were all kinds of social reasons to not do that. Nowadays, it's almost like a free-for-all. Sexual immorality is laughed at. All the moral standards that were here in society based on a Christian worldview are pretty much gone, except for in those church communities where they teach the Bible and they teach the moral standards. And there's always even a challenge in the communities that are faithful to resist temptation, but the ones that are very loose and casual about sexuality, they're just casually involved in this kind of stuff. So that really affects the operation of the church. And so there needs to be, I think, at this time, a real effort to try to understand how, as leaders and pastors and people who have a responsibility in the church, how do we safeguard, especially children, especially teenagers, people who are not at the age of consent, how to protect them from our evil, wicked age, and how to protect them from this idea that anything goes sexually. Now, most people know, and even the secular people know, that adults preying on children is wrong and deserves a swift and strict punishment. But 50 years ago, this didn't seem to be a problem. And one of the things that the Roman Catholic Church abuse scandal showed us, that it is a problem. And one of the best kept secrets in our society today is that the massive sexual abuse problem in the public schools. Now, this is something the mainstream media tries to suppress. They don't want this out in the public, but there is a massive, massive problem in public schools every year. Thousands and thousands of accusations and thousands of actual people investigated, and it's just a big mess. Well, you never hear about that because that's a narrative that the mainstream media doesn't want people to be alarmed about over the public schools, or else the parents wouldn't send their kids. But there is a massive, massive problem in the public schools, far greater than anything that the Roman Catholic Church had. And the Roman Catholic Church had a substantial problem. Hopefully, they have gotten their act together, and a lot of that has been cleaned up, especially in the leadership, where you remove people who are questionable, who are not totally 100% trustworthy. And especially you don't allow them around children and so forth. But in the public school, they're giving those teachers and administrators a free pass when they know the statistics are there to show that there is a real problem. Now, in the Southern Baptist Convention, we have to decide and figure out if there's a, quote, crisis. And we have to define what we mean by crisis if we're going to use that term. Because, again, there are always going to be, unfortunately, sadly, there's always going to be people who come into Southern Baptist churches and behave this way. And the only way you can stop that is to have such a strict and massively thick fence around your church that only people that are at this level way up here are allowed in, and then you're not welcoming the sinners. But you want the sinners to come into the church and get converted, but you don't want them teaching Sunday school, or you don't want them working with young people necessarily if their problem happens to be of a sexual nature and that they're predators. You want them to be very strictly handled and said, no, you can come to church on Sunday morning, but you cannot work with children, and you cannot work with teenagers, and there has to be a very strict understanding of that. Well, there's a lot of work that has to be done there among leaders in not only Southern Baptist churches, but all Bible-believing churches, to make sure that we don't have predators in the church preying on young people and committing these sins. So people need to be confident that they have leaders who are addressing these issues. But that doesn't mean we have to grovel and act like, oh, we're just like the Roman Catholics, it looks like, and we have a crisis and it's terrible. Wait, one person who's been preyed upon, that's terrible in and of itself, but that doesn't mean that we have a crisis in the Southern Baptist Convention. It means we have a problem, like among other problems, and we have to address this problem. But we have to, first of all, find out to the extent it is a problem. And we can't use this hyperbolic, emotional language that the mainstream media uses for everything to smear Christianity. We have to look at this from a calm, rational, not emotional standpoint. There are people in the church that are all emotional about this. Whenever there's accusations, wait, we have to sift through this. We have to find out what the truth is and then take very strict solutions to it. But again, we have to be clear thinking, look at this information, try to get it proportionate, get a perspective on it, and then take action. So that's what I'm going to be trying to do in the next few weeks. I'm going to go through the report and try to make sense of it and see what is actually being said here and what can actually be done without emotionally reacting about this information. Well, hope that's been a helpful commentary. We'll see you back next week. More on this topic later. God bless.